Hi friends, this is Angelica. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be making these adorable caramel apple cards using products from the Greetery's Harvest Fest collection. We're going to start first with the caramel apple die. This is a 7-piece die set and I've already die cut colored cardstock with all of the dies so I can put together 2 caramel apples. I'm going to start with the caramel pieces. This is Honey cardstock by Tailored Expressions. And I'm going to darken this cardstock a little bit with the coordinating honey ink. This is just going to make the caramel look a bit richer and bring some depth to the caramel. For the caramel piece that goes on the bottom of the apple, I'm going to start with Copic markers to add extra color. So I'm starting with E35 to map out where the bottom of the apple would be. And I'm going to blend that line out with E33 and finish the blending with E31. I thought the markers would be a lot easier to add depth to the bottom of the caramel instead of trying to use the ink, but I am using ink at the top of the caramel and I'm using a pretty heavy hand. I'm going to do the same blending on the apples. I did use Concord and Ninth Poppy cardstock for the apples, and I'm blending mulled wine ink onto the apples. And you can see I'm using a second craft mat here while I'm doing this. These inks are super pigmented and they will stain. In fact, the ink blending I just did with the honey ink did stain my mat because I forgot to use this craft mat. I don't really care that my mats get stained. As you can see, I've lost a few battles with some purple and brown inks, hence the bright pink stains. But if I can prevent a stain, I'm going to. Now that I have the ink blending done, I'm going to add the caramel pieces to the apples with some glue, and I'm going to move on to the popsicle sticks. I die cut toffee cardstock with the popsicle stick die, and I just added a little bit of dough ink to the popsicle stick just to darken it up a little bit. The apples come with a slit die cut in them so you can slide the stick in. So I have the stick in position. I'm going to add a little bit of glue to the back of the stick and also on the back side of the apple. And I didn't realize I was doing this off screen, but I'm just adding like the smallest little drop of glue just to keep that stick in place. I also glued one of the leaves to the back of the stick so that apple has a cute little leaf on it. And I'm going to pull out my white gel pen and add a couple highlights to the apples before I add that little chocolate swirl onto the apple with the caramel on the bottom. I did make sure to tap off the glue that I put on the back of this swirl on my mat first before putting it on the apple, so there would be no like glue coming out because this is a really thin die cut. For the second apple, I'm going to use Nouveau Crystal Glaze to make that caramel look super shiny. So I'm going to cover all of the caramel with the glaze. I'm being very generous with the amount that I'm using. And I'm going to move right into topping that wet glaze with Nutty Bits. So these Nutty Bits look just like chopped nuts, and they're just like the perfect topping for this caramel apple. So I'm going to do a nice sprinkle of the nuts right onto the wet glaze, and then I'll put the apple aside and let that glaze dry. I think it took about an hour and a half for it to completely dry, and it does dry flat. Now we're going to move on to the sentiments. I'm going to be using the Fall Foodie Phrases stamp set. This does have a coordinating die set that die cuts the larger words in this stamp set, and I used that die to die cut white cardstock. I put the die cut panel in my MISTI, lined up the stamps, and stamped them with black ink. I do have a grip mat in my MISTI that is holding all of the die cuts in their place. For the card bases, I'm going to make frames to put on them. I'm going to be using the Frosted Frames die set, the large frame in this die set. And before I die cut the cardstock with this frame, I am going to back the cardstock with Ken Oliver's Stick It adhesive. I love to use this adhesive when I'm making intricate die cuts, and the little swirly part of the frosted frames is really, really thin. So for me, it's too hard to add glue to the back of the swirls. So I'd much rather just put adhesive on the back of the cardstock before I die cut it. And I like to use this particular brand because it is so thin. There are other adhesive sheets that you can use, but they're also really aggressive. They're really strong, where this adhesive gives you time to move your die cut around on your card front before it's like a permanent stay. So you could see here how intricate that swirl is, and to have a really light adhesive on the back of it, it's just going to make it a lot easier to get it into place. And once it is into place and you push it firmly into the paper, it sticks. So I have the first part of the frame down. I did use honey cardstock for the frame. And now I'm going to add a red swirl. And since I used the Stick It adhesive, I have time to get that swirl into place, make sure it's snug up against the honey frame. And I'm just taking my time, and I'm not really worried if any of the adhesive touches the honey cardstock, because I have time to move it off the cardstock, get it into place, and not worry about ripping the red swirl or ripping up part of the honey cardstock like I would if I used a more aggressive adhesive. Now I'm going to bring that apple in and one of the sentiment words and do a quick layout. This is the layout that I'm going to be using for all of the cards. I just need to pick out different sentiments. So I'm going to read all of the smaller sentiments that are in the Fall Foodies phrases stamp set and pull out words that will match the stamped words I have picked for each card. I'm going to use my Waffle Flower Crafts placement guide to help me line up the words. This is such a useful tool to make sure that you have your stamps on straight and spaced correctly, and you can stamp on the sheet before you stamp onto your card base to make sure everything looks good. I do like the way that this looks, so I'm going to wipe off the acetate. I'm going to get the placement guide out of my MISTI. I do have a grip mat in my MISTI, so that's how it was staying in place. And then I'm going to stamp the words right onto the card base. I did the same thing with the other two card bases. I just forgot to turn on my camera. So this is going to end the video part of or the recording of this video. And now we're going to look at the pictures. So you can see the different sentiments that I picked. Now with the caramel on the top of the apple, once that crystal glaze was dry, I did glue the sticks to the back of the apple. And I put the leaves on the left side of the apple so I had more room on the right side for the sentiments. I do have a lot more projects that I'm sharing over on my blog using products from the Harvest Fest collection. So I'll leave a link down in the description if you want to stop by to see them. I will also leave a link here to another video I posted today showcasing the new Jumbo Curiosity Acorns die. And be sure to subscribe before you leave so you don't miss out on future videos. I will be back shortly with another project, so I'll see you then. Take care, friends.